Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and today we are doing our O'Keeffe Abstract Flower Project. Aww. We have Landon here who's working the cameras.
Hey everybody.
Keenan is still sick, that dang Keenan, but we're so lucky to have Landon here who can come in and film with us. Okay, so we are going to be doing this project in 3 steps. Now I know that usually how we do the steps is they're layered, and they kind of make sense, but this one, because this is such a loose project and abstract, we're kind of like throwing caution to the wind and just moving back and forth. So our very first step is we're gonna paint the center, and then step 2 and 3 is we're gonna be moving from the outside inside back and forth. And that's because these layers are touching, and I'm gonna move back and forth to allow drying time in between. Now, if you have a heat gun or something like that that you can heat in between layers, you can do this project in any order you want. And really, you can do this project in any order you want, no matter what. This one, it's more about like color transitions and sections of color. So approach this how you wanna approach it. We're just gonna go for it. Okay, and that's it. Those are all the steps. There's not more than that. We are using 4 colors for this project. So our very first color is deep blue. Our second color is magenta. Our third color is tiger orange. And our last color is black. So I have those on my palette. They're kind of already starting to mix. That's okay. And I'm using 3 paintbrushes for this project. We have a round 12, a round 2, and a round 6. Now, a round 2 and a round 6 are our standard go-to brushes. I've started to introduce other brushes into our tutorials to familiarize you guys with how to use different brushes, because it's just helpful to have different tools for different needs and when to use what. These are the Let's Make Art Classic series, but you can also use really whatever you have. Just a little bit of a larger brush will be easier for this project, especially as we do this outer layer of like light values. It's just such a big area to paint that you're gonna want a larger brush. I'm using Let's Make Art cold press paper. It is wood pulp paper. It's not 100% cotton, but I think it works really well with our liquids. Make sure you paint on the more textured side, and I'm using Holbein soft tape to tape it down. It's a very gentle tape, and I like 99% of the time get really clean edges. And so we are going to do our outline, and then our oath, and then get to painting. So we have an outline here. Go ahead and tape it to your paper. And then I'm going to take my graphite paper and do dark, shiny side down. And whatever mark you make, that is going to show up on your paper. I'm trying to see if I have a marker. Do you see a marker in that bin?
I don't see.
That's okay. I can use a pencil. But just so you know, if you use a marker, you can tell what lines you've traced because it's a different color, and it's a softer tip, so your lines won't be as dark underneath. So what I like to do is I like to do one test line. So I draw, and then I lift, and I say, okay, that's too dark or too light, and then I adjust from there. Now with watercolor, watercolor is transparent. That means you will be able to see through the paint underneath. So try and make your lines as light as possible, because you will be able to see them through the paint. I'm gonna make mine a little bit darker so you guys can see what's going on camera. And remember, our philosophy with outlines is these are a guide. This is not a coloring page. You don't have to follow this exactly. I just don't want the ability to draw stop you from learning how to paint. Because drawing is really hard, actually. And it's painting is really fun, and I just want you to get to the painting part. Drawing's fun too, but it's different kind of fun. Okay, and then I just kind of lift and check. Now there are multiple ways that you can transfer an outline onto your paper. I use graphite paper because I think it's the simplest way. A lot of people don't like it. That's okay. You can also use a light box to transfer, you can use a window. But I think we carry light boxes that are like 20 bucks. And for some people, they said it like totally changed how they view transferring images, which is great. Okay, and now you'll see a dashed line here. Now, dashed lines you don't have to trace. It's a reminder for me to show you that there's a value shift. So you don't have to trace a line. You can if you want to, but a value shift is just adjusting the lightness and darkness of the color that you're using, and so it doesn't necessarily, it's not its own like section or form. So I'm not going to trace those, and then I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and see if I got all the lines, because the tricky thing is once you remove this sucker, there's no going back. Oh, I missed this one. Okay. Okay. Now, if you do lift up your paper and you recognize that you missed this section, just eyeball it. Not a big deal. Okay. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll keep my outline kind of handy, like keep it where I can see it still, especially if there's a lot of value shifts or something, so then I can kind of check it as I'm painting, making sure that I'm in line with that. Okay, let's do our oath. You ready? If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Ring the bell. Yes! We got it. Okay. The funny thing actually, Landon, is we did not always have that bell. Someone, I think Michelle, sent it to us, and we just incorporated it into our oath about a year ago.
Oh, I like it a lot. No,
Me
it works.
too.
Yeah, very fun.
Oh, that's a little fun ding. Okay. So let's get started. So you can start with your 6 or your 12, whatever colors you want. And we're going to paint the very center of our floral. So I'm going to grab some deep blue. I'm going to grab some black, and I'm going to mix those colors together, hoping to get like a navy color. Now, the wonderful thing about this project is this is not supposed to be a realistic representation of a flower. We're paying homage to Georgia O'Keeffe, who is an amazing artist. She's known for various subject form. This is based off of one of her paintings, Music Pink and Blue No. 2. Chris, can you put a picture of that painting up now? Thank you. Thank you. But this is your painting, and you can change whatever you want. And I'm just trying to get a nice deep blue here because that black is really strong. I added a little bit too much in my mixture. There we go, that feels better. So I just keep adding more blue to tone that down. Okay. So I'm going to get my brush wet, hit it off the side of the cup so it's damp but not dripping. And I'm just going to paint a thin layer of water in that very center of my flower. Now while it's still wet, I'm going to pick up that mixture that I already mixed and just drop it in. We're going to let that move. And we want to fill the whole area with this really strong color. So I'm going to do one more. And I kind of want the black to stay on the edge, like the darker value to stay on the edges. I'm going to drop just the blue right in the middle. Now we're going to be doing lots of wet on wet technique where we're kind of letting the colors flow and dropping color in where it's wet. It's just kind of fun. There we go. Now I have that strong color right there. Okay, well, that sounds good. Now we're going to go to our outer edge here. And I'm going to do, and if you'll notice the values, this is a dark value and this is a lighter value. And so to get a lighter value, you're going to want to make sure that you have a little bit more water in your mixture than what we did previously. So I'm going to grab, so I'm going to mix like a purple pink color. And I might just be switching my palette all around so you guys can see it, but I have some magenta and I have some blue, and I'm going to mix that together to get this nice pink color or purple color. And then I'm going to grab a little bit more magenta, so then I have like a pink purple on one side, and then purple, and then like a blue purple. You see how I have those three? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And there's a little hint of green too, so I'm going to just grab a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue, a little bit more blue. Okay, there we go. So when you're painting in light values, I add water to the mixture, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I pick up a ton of water on my brush, because when you have too much water on your brush, it puddles on your paper and things kind of just start to feel a little bit out of control. So you always want to make sure that you have like just a damp amount of water on your brush. You always hit it off the side of your cup. And now if you struggle with having too much water on your paper, utilize your paper towel until you can get used to how much water you pick up. So if you notice that you keep puddling on your paper, whenever you pick up water on your brush, hit it on your paper towel and then pick up your color. And that will kind of absorb any of the excess water you have. And I'm going to start with the green here. And then we're going to blend that out. So I'm just going to grab water and work it out to a lighter value here. Now I'm going to move to my pink right along this edge. And I'm going to work fairly quickly, because with watercolor, if you want it to blend out with smooth lines, you need to move that paint fairly quickly. If you let it sit for too long on your paper, it's a little bit harder to blend out. And then we're going to switch to purple down here. Just letting that purple run right into that pink. Blend, and I'm using my 12 because look at how big this area is that I'm painting. I want to make it easier on myself by using a bigger brush. Now I'm going to switch to that blue color. And as you can see, I'm doing this fairly quickly. I don't want you guys to overthink this. This is not about perfection. Just move, 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 move. I'm going to drop in a little extra color right at that center, right where that line is kind of dotted. I want there to be a darker value. Then I'm just going to grab water and blend out. So, okay, so we did our in, out, now we're going to go back in. Now this part in my center here is very, very wet still. You can probably see it, how glary it is on the camera. So I don't want to paint any section right now that's touching that area because it's just too wet. So I'm going to paint this guy right here. And I'm going to be honest, I'm choosing these sections arbitrarily, and you can do so as well. Your painting will inform you of which ones you should do. If this area is dry for you, then you can go ahead and do the section right around it. Mine's not, so I'm just gonna let my painting tell me what section I should paint next. So to get this color right here, it's like a sherbet color, like a, creamsicle, like orange. You know what I'm talking about.
I do. I like a good creamsicle, both in real life and in painting.
And in painting. Me too, a good sherbet. Okay, so I'm going to mix yellow and magenta and water. And I'm just going to do this light color. So, this painting is in homage to Georgia O'Keeffe, who is known for many things actually. So her paintings, she's known for her New York City landscape, like her skyscapes where she does these like buildings. She's known for her New Mexico landscapes, and she's known for skulls. She did this entire series on like cattle skulls that are beautiful, and her florals. Now the interesting thing about her florals, now I'm going to go to this section right here. Okay. So with her florals, there's a lot of assumptions of what they actually are. And I find that concept really interesting, which is you can have intention behind the art that you're creating, and you can make it for a certain purpose. But when other people look at it, they are going to have a relationship to that artwork that is totally separate from your intention of it. Because when people come to something, they come with their own lens. They come with their own experiences. They come with their own ideas. And so that is what happened a lot in her floral artwork, is she was really just trying to paint flowers up close. I actually have a quote here that I wanted to share. 1 second, you guys, 1 second. So I got this library book I got library books about all the artists out because I wanted to teach you guys. Okay, anyways. So she said, everyone has many associations with a flower. Still, in a way, nobody sees a flower. It's so small, we haven't time. So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see, what the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking time to look at it. So she really was looking at these flowers like so, and she painted these huge, I mean, they weren't 9 by 12 paintings, they were huge paintings. And she was taking these really small areas of these flowers and just painting them huge. So you're forced to look at these flowers in a new way. Now, because of that, because of the color choices, because of the shapes, the natural shapes, people associated that with feminine and feminine organs and all of these assumptions, but that was not her intention. And she didn't really, she was just like, no, I was just painting flowers big. But I feel like that's a really wonderful lesson in the fact that when you create art, at some point, you have to let it go because you create it with an intention and then you put it out into the world. And people are going to have their own opinions about it. And whether that's in line with your intention or not, you do not have any control over that. You can't control it. So I think that's a wonderful lesson in that, I don't know, people are going to operate under their own narratives, their own experiences, what they've experienced. They have the right to do that. They really do. We all have the right to look at a painting and have our own relationship with it. And there's freedom in letting that go and acknowledging that, like, you can't control every aspect of it.
Well, you should want that a little bit, I think, because that means it's affecting people and people are thinking about it critically and they're very interested by it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's such a great point, too, because, like, it doesn't have to be this. And right now I'm trying to mix a purple. If you see me struggling on my palette, I'm mixing blue and pink together to get a purple. I keep getting muddy colors. And while this is wet, I'm just going to drop this in. There we go. Like accepting that now, accepting that when you're creating your work, that especially when it comes to maybe not necessarily realistic forms, or really any forms, people are going to look at it and have their own opinions about it. That's okay. That should not dictate the value of it. That should not dictate if you keep going or not. You know, like it wasn't like, you know, she put this out there and then everyone's like, oh, Lisa, I can't believe you get away with painting this. She wasn't like so embarrassed and stopped painting and like did her own thing and hid away because people misinterpreted her art. She kept going because she recognized that you can't control that part of it, and that's okay. And she still explored and she still tried these new things. And so like my hope with doing this lesson is showing you that you can explore different elements and you can be interested and playful and try these new things and see where it takes you and try new techniques. You know, be out there, be a little bit crazy. But then also at some point, you have to let it go. And when you put it out there, you can't control how it's received, and that's okay. Okay. So I did, as you can see here, I wet the area and I dropped in this purple paint. I stayed with the darker values on the edges and then let it kind of get to a lighter value in the middle. I'm just going to kind of blend this because I really like that value transition. Okay, that feels good. Now let's go up here so we can let these areas dry. So this is kind of like a purple red to pink. So this project is also just a really great project in color mixing and value transitions. And how I actually did this project is the original painting, I wrote it down too because I thought it was really nice. Hold on, let me find it. So she was fascinated with what she called the idea that music can be translated into something for the eye. So this is like a visual representation of music that she's experienced. And when I looked at it, I saw like the different layers of petals. So for me, it read very, very floral, even though that wasn't her intention. So what I did with this is I found a picture of a flower on Pixabay, which is, I mean, hopefully you guys are familiar with that because that's where we get a lot of our reference photos. It was a rose, a close-up version of a rose, which I'm sure you can kind of feel with the different layers and stuff. And then I looked at the colors that she was using in the music Pink and Blue #2, and I kind of just went with it. Now I kind of adjusted the layers itself because some of these, like I think there was more layers that read really, really floral. I didn't want this to read as a multicolored rose. I wanted it to be in between that. Is that a flower? What's going on? Is that a layer? That kind of thing, which, I mean, like, I feel like that's what O'Keeffe was known for in her work, was you can tell that there are these natural elements to her work and her paintings, but you weren't necessarily sure exactly what they were. And when we released this project and announced it to our Facebook group, there were some comments that said it reminded them of a landscape. And that made me so incredibly happy because that is exactly what O'Keeffe's work was like, where it's just like, is that a landscape? Is that a flower? Is that a form? You can't tell, but you know there's something natural about it in the shapes, in the curves, in the movements. There's that life to it. I don't know, pretty cool. Okay. I'm just having the best time talking here that I'm losing the painting. Sorry, you guys. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of this like orange red in this while it's nice and wet, and then I'm just going to blend it out. Okay. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a darker pink edge here. I just love a good dark edge. And you just touch it in there and just let it bleed and move and you accept it. That's what we do with watercolor. Okay. Now let's paint this section. This section's blue. Man, my palette is getting all types of crazy. I might have to clean it halfway through. Okay, so this is just blue, just deep blue. And I'm still using my 12. The cool thing about this painting too, or like the idea of this painting, which is kind of taking like abstracting forms, simplifying them, is you can, sorry, I just realized I missed a line, so I'm going to put that in there. You can also like turn this on its side. You know what I mean? Like you can totally change the orientation of this. And actually that could totally help if you were trying to step more into abstraction and further away from a flower. You can change the composition totally. So instead of this being landscape, put it on its side, be a portrait, and go from there. Okay, let's do this kind of red color right here. And you can see I'm kind of just drawing in some lines where I forgot to trace. It's not the end of the world. There we go. Okay, and actually, I'm going to take my paper towel and wipe off this big gray area because we don't actually need it anymore. Now I love my butcher palette because it helps me to mix to my heart's content. I have this whole gorgeous middle for mixing, but try and keep your colors on the side and try and make sure your table is level so then they don't bleed together. Okay. So let's do magenta and yellow. Okay, so I'm going to grab my 12 and I'm going to mix the magenta and yellow to get a nice red. Now the more magenta you put in there, the more red and pink it's going to be. The more yellow you put in there, the more orange it's going to be. Just play with that until you get the mixture that you like. We're just going to put that in. We're just going for it. Rinse your brush, hit it off the side of the cup, and that's how you get a lighter value. And I'm just going to keep going with this lighter value up. And I'm going to introduce a little bit more yellow into this to warm up that light wash. Now you can go all the way to the edge here because this is dry. And then when we get to the top right, I'm working in a barely there color, which means that I'm not picking up any more paint. I'm just rinsing my brush and utilizing the paint that's already there. So this is like a super, super light value. Just like that.
Now, when it comes to the lines, if people maybe wanted to add a line, or if they thought it would be cool to, take a line from where it goes and end it somewhere else, do you think that could be something people would do to kind of change up that pattern?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, this is a great project where you're just like, you know what? Like, I think it would be better if I did another little section right here in green or whatever. Like, this is a wonderful project to play with, making it your own. Adjust those lines, adjust those colors, adjust those values, make it yours. Because again, and I'm noticing a theme here as I'm kind of doing research on all of these artists that we're painting. It's not about recreating something that's real. We're not trying to look at this rose and being like, this rose has to be super perfect. We're trying to go above that, or no, beyond that. We're trying to go beyond that. And so, like, this is a great project where you can explore what that looks like. What does that look like for you? Do you like these colors? Do you like, the techniques that we're using, the wet on wet, the value? Like, great project to make your own. Take your time, play with it. But it's harder to do that. I think it's really scary to do that, especially if you're new, because we think, like, I'm gonna mess this up. And if I mess this up, that means I'm not good at this. And if I'm not good at this, then that makes me feel bad about myself, right? But just so you know, everybody starts somewhere. We just don't really talk about that part. We don't post the mess ups. We don't post all the mistakes. We don't post where we fumble or fall or fail, because we're not proud of those moments. But they're a necessary part into learning. And so our whole point is to talk openly about them. There will be times where you paint something and you're like, ooh, I don't know about that guy. But we're just trying to remind you, this is a piece of paper. So the worst thing that can possibly happen is it gets thrown in the trash. But don't let that stop you from creating or trying something new or learning. Okay, so you can see when I put this color in here that it bled, and I kind of really love that. So I'm gonna let that go. You could, like, if this was your painting, you could try and lift that like warmness out and then put that pink purple on it again. But to me, this is like a happy accident. I love that transition. So I'm not mad about it. I'm just gonna move on, embrace it, appreciate watercolor for what it does, and keep going. Okay, I'm gonna do this like pink section over here. And this one I'm gonna put water down first. And then I'm gonna grab this magenta. I feel like I need more. Good thing we give you a lot of paint because we're going a little bit crazy with our paint colors here. I'm just gonna pop in this pink. Ooh, look at that. Look at that bleed and go. so much of watercolor is understanding that you cannot control every single aspect to it, and that's okay. So like, I didn't mean for that to happen. I kind of love how that turned out though. And that's why I think I'm a huge fan of just like letting your painting inform you as you go. Because it's gonna do things that maybe you don't want it to do or you didn't expect it to do. And instead of getting mad at it, like instead of getting mad at watercolor for being watercolor, you just learn to let go a little bit. Okay, that's green. We're gonna do that same purple pink color up here. Now, there are lots of sections and lines and you know what I'm trying to say. Landon gets it.
I think I do. Anyway.
But we sometimes say get lost in the sauce. I don't know where that came from. But if you get lost in the sauce, that's fine. Just let go, embrace it, keep going. Don't get too mad at yourself, because it's just like one section is pink instead of orange. Like it's not a huge deal.
Do you ever find yourself trying to like inform those little happy accidents? Or is that a very bad idea? Just kind of let them happen if they happen, and if not, then that's okay too.
You know, honestly, it's both, actually. I think when I first started watercolor, I had to let go of those happy accidents and the bleedings and the textures that happened that I didn't mean to happen. I had to learn how to embrace those. And then as I've painted more and more, like I do those things on purpose now sometimes. Sometimes I don't, but sometimes I'm just like, I really want this orange to bleed into this pink, so I'm just gonna help it. Come on, little guy, let's bleed into there. So absolutely, you can kind of like control some of that. But I think it just comes with practice and recognizing like, okay, I know how to make a bloom happen there. Or I don't, and then you let it go. Okay, we're gonna do like this orange color here. I'm still using my 12 just because I feel like I'm still doing kind of bigger sections, but please feel free to switch to your 6 and 2 depending on your comfort level. I feel like I have a lot of control with this 12, but I also am a little bit more familiar with brushes, so I feel confident in my brush control. If you're not quite there, that's okay. That's not a big deal. Just switch with a smaller brush. Let's do this red section here. Red, orange. Man, I really do love how that bled out. That's beautiful. Now, the great thing too about looking at the masters, I mean, the whole theme of this box is let's make history. We're really looking back at the greats and learning from them of how they do that. And when I was majored in art in college, that was some of the assignments where you would look at some famous artists and you would recognize like qualities about their work, and then you would implement that into your own, because that's an excellent way to learn. Even if like they didn't resonate with you, there's still opportunity to take something from that and apply that to your own work. So like these colors might not necessarily be the color palettes that I work in, but when you look at other artists and what they've done and what they've accomplished, you can take those qualities, apply it to your own, and learn something new. I'm just dropping in red right on the edge, letting it bleed, not totally controlling where it bleeds out to, and being okay with that. Okay. Now we're going to do this section up here. That's like a green-blue section. And again, just a friendly reminder, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. You can paint, I mean, we're really are just going section by section. So whatever section you want to go to next, you can. Okay. Now the other thing too is you can always go back into a section and make adjustments. Like I'm looking at this outer edge right here, and I feel like I lost my dark value a little bit right here. Now it's nice and dry, so I can go ahead and put another layer on top to darken that value. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of my deep blue. This technique is called wet on dry. That means I'm putting something wet onto a dry surface. And I'm just gonna paint that blue right on top. Now, if I have too much water on my brush, this would create a bloom. A bloom is when you get like a hard edge on your painting. Let me see if I have one. This paper doesn't bloom super easy. This one is kind of it. Can you see how there's kind of a line right there?
Yeah, I can't see that.
Yeah. So a bloom, sometimes it's even harder, like a really hard line. And that comes from uneven drying times and uneven water areas on your paper. So if I have too much water on my brush when I'm going in here to lay down the second value, I'm gonna get some hard edges right here. So I just made sure that I was picking up mostly paint and not having it be a super light value. So I'll still have a light edge here, I mean a hard edge here, but that's from the paint and not from the water. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, great, great. Landon, we're getting along great here. Just agree with everything I say and we're good to go. Okay, so now I'm gonna do this section. This is kind of a green color. So I'm gonna mix my yellow and blue over here and start with green. So I'm doing the edge green here. Oh, I can see where I missed a line. That's okay. We're just gonna keep going. And just use water to blend that out. Oh, and I touched that blue. Look at that blade. Okay, that's really cool though. So we're just gonna let that dry and I'm just gonna see what happens. Now for you guys at home, like let's say you're working on something, you accidentally touch an area and paint goes everywhere and you're like, you have this moment of like, oh no, oh no, oh no. Take a deep breath, grab a paper towel, use a paper towel to pick up that paint that bled through and it will be barely there. I'm gonna leave this here because I actually think it's kind of cool. But just so you know, like whenever that happens, it happens to everybody all the time. It doesn't matter your skill level. And when color gets in an area where you don't want it to be, grab a paper towel, pick up that color, and it will be like a hint of what was there. So you can adjust and fix those. It's not a huge deal. Okay, we're gonna let that be for a second. We're gonna do this like reddish area right here. The other thing I want to point out is like even though we're all using the same paint colors, we're doing a ton of color mixing in this project, which means your painting is going to look very different from my painting. That also means that my painting is going to look different from the reference photo, and that's because it is super, super hard to paint the same exact painting twice or more than twice, even if it's the same artist. It's really tricky because we're mixing all the colors, because it depends on how much water you pick up, because it depends on if you accidentally touch this or not, you know? So don't be too hard on yourself if there's like an element that feels different than what you're seeing from your reference photo or from me. And we embrace that in art. We celebrate that. Look, that pink bled there a little bit too. I'm going to do a little extra pink right there to redden that up. There we go. There we go. Okay. Now let's do this guy right here. This is like a purple blue. So I'm going to need fresh paint. Okay. And then I think after this one, I'm going to switch to my 6 and my 2s because I'm getting smaller into my sections here. So I have my blue and I'm mixing a little bit of magenta. So I'm going to start with this purple color. And I see another section I missed. That's okay, I'll just leave it blank and put it in later. Okay. And then I'm going to start introducing more blue to this mixture. So it kind of turns into like a lavender color. And then back to the more purple. This is also, I was thinking back to like Landon, you saying like people making this their own and how it's easy to like, is this an easy project to kind of adjust? This is also like, because of all of the color transitions that we're doing, sometimes it's easier to practice those techniques, color transitions, values, washes, that kind of thing, when we're not so tied to the outcome. Because we can let go of the expectations of what we think this painting should turn out and just focus on the technical aspects of it, which is, how do I get a lighter value? How do I transition from this? And so like, this is a great project because there's a little bit of form to it, but it's not so much that you really can practice and play with switching from a blue to a purple, back to a purple, you know? A lot of the time our expectations kind of just get in the way of our creativity. We just get too caught up in what we think it should be or should look like, that we don't leave room for curiosity or exploring or our own voice. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at it back and forth. Okay, now I'm going to do this purple blue section. Man, I really loved the purple, pink, blue in this, didn't I? Okay, I'm going to need more paint. Oh, and if you're wondering what kind of style, like famous artists have different styles that they're known for. Like Matisse that we did earlier in the month was a Fauvist. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's a French term. And if you knew how many times I did like the audio, you know when you Google a word and you press like the sound so it says what it is?
Right.
I did that like 4 times and then I spelled it out on my paper. I believe it's Fauvist. Please let me know if I'm wrong. But Georgia O'Keeffe was a modernist. And I wrote down the definition of modernist. I really wish that I had the knowledge that I could like tell you what it was without reading definitions, but I'm not quite there and that's okay. But I wrote it down for you. So modernism is a rejection of history and conservative values, so realistic depictions of subjects. And it experiments more with form and shapes and colors and lines, and it has a tendency to be more abstract. So like if you're looking at this and what we're doing, like that totally falls in line with the modernism style. The other artists that we're talking about, so in this box, so like I said, Matisse was a Fauvist. I'm so afraid every time I say that I'm going to say it wrong. And Monet was Impressionism. He was like the father of Impressionism, which is one of my favorite movements and styles. And Van Gogh was actually post-Impressionism. And we'll talk more about those in those tutorials, but just giving you a little overview. How do you feel about art history, Landon?
I like it, actually. I think it's quite interesting. I don't know much about it, but I do think it's interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because as an art major, like you had to take art history as some of your classes. And it wasn't until I was in college that I recognized that people could be interested in art history even if they didn't create art. Like that never crossed my mind. But like, it's such an interesting subject, but for me, it was just a way to get to painting. It was just a way to learn how to improve my painting or like the history of painting for like my own work. And then there were a lot of people that I met who they're like, yeah, I'm just an art history major. And I'm like, great, what do you paint? They're like, we don't paint. I don't paint. And I'm like, what? And then it was just, we were both fascinated by each other because they had questions. They're like, why do you paint? What do you try? You know, it's just this really interesting concept. But
it feels kind of maybe the difference between a filmmaker and a film critic.
Yeah.
Someone who's really interested in the idea of it and someone who actually wants to get out and do it. And there's value to both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's value in both. Okay. Now I'm just dropping in like straight purple, like strong purple color right in this wet. It's bleeding, it's going places, it's doing its thing. I'm okay with that. I'm not mad about it. I'm letting it be watercolor. And, ooh, that bled a little bit. That's cool. And I'm okay with it. It's not, this is the fun part, especially with this project. We have room here for play. We have room here for accidents. We have room here for interesting textures. You don't have to control it all the time. And I know that that can be hard for some people, but I think it's a great lesson in letting go. You know, life lesson. Okay, I'm gonna darken this edge here by just doing a dark value right here. And that's mostly just because I wanted some value difference. I just felt like that was feeling too even in value. And I'm going to go in there and mess it up a little bit. Okay. Now this area is going to be like that same light green that we had. And look at what that blue did. Look at that dry. Isn't that nice? Oh. That's why watercolor is so fun, I think. You don't know what you're going to get until you get it. Okay, you guys, we've been here for a while. We're gonna kick this up into gear. I'm gonna paint fast. Okay. So this section is like a red-orange. So now, you guys, I'm just going for it. I'm just gonna paint. Don't stress. Remember, if you're on YouTube or whatever service you're watching, you can pause. You can rewind if I'm not going. You can fast forward if I'm talking too much. I tend to do that. You can control your video watching experience. I'm just going to paint. Okay. This one I'm going to do magenta. Now I feel like I'm losing a little bit of my values here. And again, values is the lightness and darkness of a color. And some of these sections are just kind of turning into even values. And I want to kind of disrupt that a little bit. For me personally, I really love when there is a huge scale of value where we have very light lights, very dark darks, and they kind of contrast with each other. I really love that. And so I'm going to purposely go in and do some really dark values and some barely there colors next to each other. Now, if you're painting next to a section that's still really wet, like this purple one is, you can use a heat gun and let that dry, or you can leave a really thin white line in between the sections if you want to avoid bleeding. So I'm going to do that. And I'm okay with that, just having a little bit of a white edge. It's not a big deal. Oh, I got a little bit of bleeding there. That's okay. Oh, let's drop in that pink. Okay. And just one little swoop. Boop. Okay. That feels good. What else we got here? I think we just have 4 more sections. Well, that's not too bad. Okay, so this one is going to be like a really warm yellow. Now the thing with watercolors, especially these liquid watercolors, is they reconstitute with water. So like if these dry on your palette, if you add water to them, they come right back up. And that's why sometimes we get so much bleeding, is like even though there's a section that's dry on your painting, sometimes depending on how strong the color is, how much water we're touching it with, those colors will come right back alive and bleed. And that's a huge difference between like any of the other mediums, is that, you know, with acrylic, once something is dry, oh man, you cannot move that, you know? And so watercolor, there's always like this fluidity to it where it can come back to life a little bit. And that's okay. We just know that about it. We embrace that about watercolor. We're not mad at it for that aspect of it. And we just learn how to work with it. Okay? And this is like an orange color. This section right here. And I'm using my 6. Okay. And then this is like a light blue, and I love like that light blue against that dark blue right there. It's just like that contrast. And what you can do with this area is, instead of picking up light blue, you can just pull the color from what we already laid down. What I was just talking about. This has been dry for a while, but watercolors reconstitute when wet. So I'm just gonna pull that color. Boop. And now I have a nice light value right there. Okay, I'm going to switch to my 2 to do these really thin areas right here. So let's do this like orange. And you just want to make sure, like I'm just trying to make sure that I'm at least using different colors or values in the sections that they're by to make them stick out. So this is reading a little bit too close to this petal that's above it. So I'm going to add some red into it to kind of differentiate between the two. Okay. And let's do, this section is like an orange. Just one little swipe is enough. And this is a yellow. But what I'm gonna do before I get to that is I'm gonna go back and like all of these white areas, I'm gonna try and fill in. Now if they're bothering you, like for me, they're standing out a little bit too much. I don't mind white sections or like blank areas, except when they're like popping out at me, almost like yelling at me to like fix them. But if they're not bothering you and you have some in yours, then like there's no need to go back in here. Do whatever your painting is telling you to do. So I'm just going in here. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going in with my 6, and just like wherever I see like big chunks, I'm just gonna clean them up just a little bit. Maybe I should have added one extra step in here, which is just kind of like cleanup or tightening, like just like, let's tighten. Let's put this all together. Okay. And this, we're gonna do some over here. Okay. I can tell how fast I was working by how many like bleed areas I get. That's okay. Okay. And then going in here. It doesn't have to be a ton of paint that you're putting down. Sometimes I just take a damp brush and kind of like blend the area, because white is going to stick out so much more than just kind of like a medium or light value. So sometimes it's just about putting a little bit of color to it, and that makes it not seem like, that makes it push back a little bit. Yeah, already I feel like those are feeling much better. Let's go in here. Okay. And sometimes when things are dry like this, you can get a nice crisp edge, just nice and strong and bold. Okay, okay, okay. All right, now I just need to do this section, I think. I think that's it. So, I'm gonna switch to my 6 for that. And that is like an orange, like a bright orange. So I'm gonna get some fresh yellow. So my yellow is, I'm calling it yellow, but it's tiger orange. But I'm utilizing it as a yellow. Okay. Also, let's look at my paper towel. Isn't that cool? All those colors. Sometimes a paper towel turns out better than the painting. Okay. Remember, we're just trying to go for either a different color or a different value than what's surrounding it, just to make it clear of the different sections. But really, whatever that value and color is, up to you. This is your painting. It's your life. Just doing a nice dark edge on it. Okay, and then I feel like this needs a stronger edge. Like, even though these are two different colors, the values are very similar between this section and this section, and I want to separate those just a little bit. So I'm going to mix a medium orange, put that in, rinse your brush, blend that out, just to separate those two areas a little bit more. There we go. And you can blend all the way out if you want. Okay. Ooh, that feels better to me. I think we're done. I think we did it. Do you see any white sections?
No, I think you covered it.
Yes, we got it. Now remember, this is your painting. You are free to go back in, maybe tighten up some sections, clean up some lines, adjust some things if you want to do like another layer of value on some of the really light areas. Like, this is your painting. Please feel free to play with it. And this is such a great practice in what we've talked about earlier, exploring technique, simplifying form, playing with it, exploring. And you can do this same thing with any photo. So if you find another photo of a flower, like, feel free to take that image like I did of the rose, simplify it. I took out quite a few petals and lines on mine, but simplify it, make it yours, play with that modernist style, play with going a little bit more abstract, see what that does. Free yourself up from this idea that you have to create something that looks exactly like you see in real life. If you're on Facebook, you can share it in our watercolor group. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. If you're on Instagram, go ahead and tag us at Let's Make Art, or no, I said that wrong. Tag us at Let's Go Make Art, or hashtag Let's Make Art. And if you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. And please, have fun with this. And Georgia O'Keeffe, thank you for being our inspiration. We appreciate you. Landon, always a pleasure. You did great.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Okay, we'll see you guys later.